Hi, my name is John Joyce. I'm a staff person at Gettysburg Public Library. And this is not only a book review, this is an apology to Joyce Kilmer. I discovered this book the other day in the stacks of the Gettysburg Public Library when I was shelving. Joyce Kilmer, Poems, Essays, Letters. It's a 1918 edition, rebound. And on page 5 or so, there's a photograph of Joyce Kilmer. He looks like he's 17 years old there, but actually he was 30. I doubt that it's a book that's been checked out very often, and I suspect younger generations don't even know who Joyce Kilmer is. But I was drawn to it as soon as I noted the name on the spine, Joyce Kilmer. I've always felt that Joyce Kilmer and I have a connection because we both share the same name, Joyce. For me, it was a name that caused me all kinds of grief in grade school. Kids would razz me about it constantly because, as Blaise Mahoney so succinctly put it, Joyce is a girl's name. And you're a guy. John Joyce, what a dumb and girly name, I'd whine to my mom. Why couldn't you name me something cool like Rocky Steele? To lessen the pain, my dad would always insist I was related to the Irish writer James Joyce. I felt he was BSing me, but even if it were true, I wouldn't be very impressed by that. It's not as though at that age, I could derive any satisfaction from the likelihood that I too could grow up to be a drunken Irish writer. But what did assuage the emotional distress is what I learned in 3rd grade. That year in school, we had to read a poem by Joyce Kilmer entitled Trees. And back then, everybody had to read that poem in school. And you might remember it. It began, I don't think I shall ever see a poem as lovely as a tree. I thought it was pretty corny at the time. But a couple months later, I discovered that Joyce Kilmer was a guy. And I thought I had it bad with Joyce for a last name. That poor guy probably got the crap beat out of him every day on the playground at school. And that made me feel better. So I was drawn to this book. And upon paging through it, I discovered that not only is it a 1918 edition, but on one of the first pages, there is an inscription written by the original owner. Julia S. Gottwald, Christmas, 1918. I thought that was pretty cool. So I checked it out. The book includes a memoir written by a good friend, as well as a collection of his poems. The memoir, I guess you could call a hagiography, a real adulatory account of Joyce Kilmer's life, but informative nevertheless. In reading it, I learned that Joyce Kilmer was one of America's best known and most respected World War I era poets. He was also a popular lecturer, a journalist, an editor, and a literary critic who wrote book reviews for the New York Times, Literary Digest, The Nation. I read some of the poems that were collected in the volume, and I was pleased to find that I enjoyed some of them much more than I ever did Trees. In fact, there was one in particular I was taken with, and it was a poem he had written about the sinking of the Lusitania, entitled The White Ships and the Red. And this is the way it begins. With drooping sail and pennant that never a wind may reach, they float in sunless waters beside a sunless beach. Their mighty masts and funnels are white as driven snow, and with a pallid radiance their ghostly bulwarks glow. Here's a Spanish galleon that once with gold was gay. Here's a Roman trireme whose hues outshone the day. But Tyrian dyes have faded, and prows that once were bright, with rainbow stains were only dust livid, dreadful white. White as the ice that clove her that unforgotten day, among her pallid sisters the grim Titanic lay. And through the leagues above her she looked aghast and said, what is this living ship that comes where every ship is dead? And it goes on, and it concludes with the Lusitania responding to the Titanic, although the Lusitania is never actually named in the poem. I went not forth to battle, I carried friendly men. The children played about my decks, the women sang, and then the sun blushed scarlet and heaven hid its face. The world that God created became a shameful place. My wrong cries out for vengeance, the blow that sent me here was aimed in hell. My dying scream has reached Jehovah's ear. Not all the 7 oceans shall wash away that stain. Upon a brow that wears a crown, I am the brand of Cain. When God's great voices assemble the fleet on judgment day, The ghosts of ruined ships will rise in sea and strait and bay. Though they have lain for ages beneath the changeless flood, they shall be white as silver, but one shall be like blood. What really shocked me when I read Kilmer's memoir was that Joyce was actually Kilmer's middle name. His first name was Alfred, and he actually chose to be called Joyce. What? Why? If Joyce had been my first name, I would have never survived grade school. Joyce Kilmer, you're a much more intrepid young man than I. It was the sinking of the Lusitania that compelled Joyce Kilmer to join the Army in the war effort in 1917. He could have been an officer, but he chose to be an enlisted man. He was sent to France, where he could have remained a statistician and stayed in one of the quiet sectors of the front. But instead, he volunteered for hazardous duty in military intelligence to lead scouting patrols into no man's land. He was killed in action, shot by a sniper bullet to the head when he was scouting German machine gun positions. He was 31 years old. They say he was beloved by his fellow soldiers, adored by his friends, cherished by his family. The couple photos of him in the book depict him as a very likable and pleasant young man. And certainly he was a much better poet than I had originally ever given him credit for being. This was quite a revelatory read for me, a book I just happened to stumble upon in the stacks of the Gettysburg Library. And my apologies to you, Joyce Kilmer. You're a good and decent man. And now that I've read this book, this memoir and his poems, I'm now proud to share your name.